The harsh reality is that camera conspiracies has the right of it. The photography industry is flooded with shill tubing. And honestly, a lot of times it's coming from content creators that I actually enjoy watching. Here's looking at you, Tony. Now, when it comes to trendy new cameras, like let's say the Insta360 X5, this shill tubing gets off the charts because basically you go to say, hey, what's this camera like, and look for a review. And all of the reviews are either sponsored or they're an affiliate relationship. Now, I'm not saying there's a problem with an affiliate relationship. I've done them in the past. There's also nothing wrong with taking a sponsor. But remember, it used to be that a sponsor was like, this video is sponsored by Gavin Seim's natural HDR presets. Get the maximum HDR out of your files and try them out for free. I'll put a link in the comments. That's an ad, right? But what we've transitioned to is stuff like this, where entire videos are set up like reviews or even called reviews, and they're just an ad. You saw this a lot last year with DXO Photo Lab. And then I came back and said, hold on, is this really a Lightroom replacement? That's why I do real reviews, because we have this toxic attitude from these companies that instead of innovating in the market, they can just advertise their way to success, and it's not going to work. So fast forward to this recent video talking about the latest version of Pure RAW, because yes, I've already reviewed Photo Lab. Pure RAW is lens corrections and noise reduction. And as you know, if you follow this channel where we talk about actual photography technique, most modern sensors don't have that much of a problem with noise, but a powerful noise reduction tool is still sometimes needed. In this video, Tony was gushing over this, and I was looking at the comparisons, and while there was a bit less noise in some of the Pure RAW photos, most of them were actually way softer, not sharper, not clearer, and in my opinion, not better. So I thought, something's wrong. I'm gonna go download Pure RAW, and we're going to test it ourselves. Okay, we're going to do a no frills, no BS. Here is a RAW file. This is on the Sony, shot at ISO 3200. I'm going to do like I normally would. So let's actually edit this. I'm going to put a preset, let's say like HDR Skinscape, and I'll bring up the exposure just a touch. Now in real life, I would probably add like a speed combo mask and do some subtle controls of the background and the subject, but let's keep it very simple. I just wanted to edit this because in real life, when you edit, you tend to adjust shadows and stuff and you get more noise. Okay, let's go down to our noise settings. We're default on sharpening right here. And you can see I've got no noise reduction. Now let's talk about this. In this AI influenced pressured world, we're kind of always pushed that we need to denoise everything until it's complete paste. The reason I don't talk about noise apps that much on this channel is because most of the time you don't need them. I could go right here and put a few points of luminous noise reduction in here, and you can see that this cleans up really nicely. And to make it kind of feel organic, I would normally go down and just add a little bit of grain to just maintain a natural kind of texture. But let's undo both of those things. Let's go down to Lightroom's AI noise reduction, which works on RAW files and saves out as a DNG. So it's going to load this up. You can actually, in the latest versions of Lightroom, do this in a batch as well, much like we do with mask combos. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at 50. I'm going to leave raw details on, and it says it's going to take about 4 seconds. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to leave the original RAW file on our tests uncolored. The Lightroom AI denoise is going to be green, and DXO Pure RAW is going to be red. So let's go back to this, go to File, and go to Plugin Extras, and we're going to preview and process with Pure RAW. And yes, you can see that I have no sponsorships. I'm not even getting a free promo copy of this. And why is that? Because I do these reviews, and then sometimes these companies will reach out and want to partner with me. And I say to them, well, no, I don't want to take a sponsorship, but I'll be happy to work with you guys to improve this because I really want to see you succeed. And then I'm ghosted. Okay, so you can run this as a separate app or just from right here in Lightroom as a plugin, right? And you can see that it's detecting the lens because Pure RAW also does lens corrections. Now you can see that I can run Deep Prime 3. There's a couple of other options, including a new Xtrans deep tool that we'll look at. So here we are in Pure RAW. I'm going to leave on all of the settings. I'm going to set the luminance to about 50 and just kind of leave everything right there and process this in Deep Prime 3. Now this actually took about the same time. it did do this thing where it puts it into this other collection and imports it back. One thing I did find, and it's super tiny, go way up here. Here's your main settings. Here's some mask tools, which I'm not really going to get into because Lightroom has great mask tools. And here is some output settings that I didn't see at first. And you notice if you go down here to these settings, instead of it making a new collection basically every time, you can actually select this option. So it just puts the photo and re-imports it into your current collection, which for me at least is way better. Now you can see me fighting with these stacks because I had to come in here and then go down and stack it with the rest. Whereas when I do this in Lightroom, it just automatically gives me my new DNG version and stacks it with the others, same collection, everything. Another thing to be aware of is that while both Lightroom's AI noise reduction and DXO give you a DNG output, DXO is just taking that raw file. It doesn't bring your settings over. I actually have to come back then to take my crop and my settings and all that and copy those and then paste those back on to the file coming out of DXO. Okay, but how are the results? Let's get real and look at it. Here is our original raw file, the Sony file. Now let's actually turn on chromatic aberration reduction and profile reductions because we had those on in DXO. And we're going to do that as well on our AI enhanced version here, which you can do after the fact. So here's our original raw. Here is our Lightroom enhanced version. And here is DXO. Now let's go to compare, and in particularly what we want to compare is how well DXO, which is here on the left, stacks up to Lightroom here on the right. Now at a glance, these both look great compared to our original. We can see that there's not much artifacting, everything is pretty clean, and overall it's looking good. If we look really close, you might be able to say that there's a tiny bit more noise on the Lightroom version, although I think the Lightroom version has a little more detail. Let's zoom into about 200% here, and you'll see what I mean. What I've noticed on DXO is that oftentimes there's a little less detail on fine strands of hair and things like that. But overall, the processing looks pretty great on both, and it looks clean on both. But if we're nitpicking, I feel like Lightroom has retained a little bit more detail. Now, of course, if we said, oh no, it's still not quite enough, you can then combine this with a tiny bit more luminance correction. You can adjust sharpening. I'm leaving things at their defaults here. And when I look at the left, which is DXO Deep Prime 3 versus the right, which is our Lightroom AI Enhance, they both have a high quality noise reduction. And so what do we do with that? Well, it's certainly not a night and day like some of the reviewers are saying when you know that I'm not a huge fan of having to go to external plugins. I'm a huge fan of using native tools. That's why I use mask combo presets and develop presets like Filmus, and why in Lightroom, in Photoshop, I use actions so that I'm using all the native tools of the apps that I'm using. Capture One, same way. Now for point of comparison between the two, let's go back to our original. On the right, we have our Lightroom enhanced version. On the left, the original raw file, but you can see we've gained a lot. Let's do the same again, our raw file on the left and our Deep Prime from DXO Pure Raw on the right. Now, one thing I want you to notice here, and this goes back to this AI age paranoia about a little bit of grain. When you compare these noise edited versions to original files, they almost seem pasty. And the truth is that even on something like this that started as a high ISO file, I would, if I reduce the noise, then come back and put a little bit of grain back on it, either with a preset or just manually down here, because I actually want a little bit of texture. I don't want everything to feel like paste. I realize that this is a personal preference, but in over 20 years of editing and watching all these apps grow and change, these trends of ultra HDR, too much dynamic range, throwing away all our shadows, throwing away all our texture and grain, they tend to come and go in my experience. And having something that feels real, especially in this AI age, is especially important. I'm saying especially entirely too much. Now, so we don't go long, I won't take you through the process of every single file because we're basically doing the same thing on all of these, but I will show you a couple of different tests I did. If you look at this file here, this is an ISO 25600 file. Not such a big deal, right? Except it was because this was taken over a decade ago on a 5D Mark II. Now, if we look at this, even with luminance noise correction, it's pretty bad. If I turned off the luminance noise, it's truly unusable. That was ISO 25000 back in the day. Now let's compare that with Lightroom's AI. On the right, we have the enhanced version, and on the left, the raw version. Let's zoom that into 1:1, and you can see that the result, even on this old file, is pretty astounding. That super grainy that luminance noise admittedly helped a lot with is a lot better in the Lightroom version. It also did a pretty great job of reducing that chromatic aberration. Now let's compare DXO's Deep Prime on the right with Lightroom's enhanced on the left. On this one, again, I feel like there's a bit more detail in the Lightroom version. Look at these up here. I know we're pixel peeping, but there's definitely a little more softness in my view coming out on the DXO version. This was my reaction when watching a review on this recently that was actually an ad, and I was looking at all the examples and I'm like, dude, the Lightroom versions look cleaner, not worse. Back to a portrait real quick. This one taking at ISO 3200 on an X-T3. On the left, we have the Lightroom enhanced version, and on the right, the DXO version. And again, we can see kind of the same thing. Look at the fine details of the hair strands. We're definitely seeing a little more fine detail retained in the hair on Lightroom. And maybe if we're being really fussy, we're seeing a little bit cleaner noise reduction on the DXO version, but honestly on this, they look equal. They look like they were both run about the same, and they're both equally clean everywhere I look here. Now, being AI apps, we're going to see slight differences in the way these introduce maybe occasional artifacts and things like that as it does the processing. You tend to notice this more in really fine details like hair strands. This is another reason why I'll usually come back on the rare occasion when I need to do this much noise reduction, and I'll put just a little bit of film grain back into it because it gives that nice organic texture. We're going to take this here, which I sometimes use in my Lightroom versus Capture One tests, because this is a Fuji file shot at ISO 10,000. So there's definitely some noise issues, although again, it's not doing bad even on our native edit here. This one I haven't even done a preset or a process to at all. This is a raw file, okay? So this is how it is out of camera. We could still add some grain. We could still add some luminance denoise, but I'm not even going to. I'm just gonna go straight to here. We're gonna do Lightroom Enhance at 50%, and we're gonna go up here, process this in pure raw, and this time, because there's so much hype that Fuji users, which I'm one of, are always subjected to, we think that Xtrans sensors don't work in modern software. And so here's this Deep Prime XD for Xtrans beta. This doesn't even work on all Fuji sensors. I'm going to leave on vignetting, chromatic aberration, and lens distortion settings. I'm going to put it on Xtrans mode and process it. Okay, I've got them all stacked and ready. All right, here we go. On the right, we have the DXO Xtrans Beta XT3, and on the left, we have Lightroom's enhanced. Let's zoom in. This is at 100%. Does seem a little cleaner, a little less noise, I should say, on the Deep Prime version on the right, although it's substantially softer. Look at these hands, the eyes, even the background, the details definitely, like on their clothes and stuff, seem softer. So we're getting more noise reduction on this. It's almost just like it's pushing harder. Look at the texture down here on the stone. Yes, it's a bit cleaner, but that doesn't mean it's always better, because you don't want to take off all of your texture. Of course, we can change the settings on these and we could play around. They're both good, right? We're zoomed in at like 1:1. Let's go into like 200%, and this is 250, right? You can see even more how, yes, there's a little more noise happening on the version here, but the DXO version is almost pure paste. So to be fair, it says it's beta on this. I don't think on a Fuji file you really need some special profile. Here's the thing. We could run these as higher settings on the AI tools, but what often happens in doing this is you start introducing more of these AI kind of artifacts, which in my opinion are worse than having noise. So I'll usually only run these at about 40 or 50. But let's go to the Lightroom version and just put 30 points of luminance denoise as well. If you really must, if you really want it that clean. I wouldn't want it this clean. Okay, let's go to compare again. Now the Lightroom one has about equal detail, right? It's a little more pasty, and the amount of noise is almost identical between these. Even if we zoom in close, like in here, you can see that there might be a tiny, tiny bit less noise on the DXO over here on the right, but man, it's really close. And I wouldn't actually need this much noise reduction. Now, this seems to be happening because we use the Fuji specific beta mode, which I don't think is necessary. As we're seeing, whether you're doing luminance, whether you're doing Lightroom AI, whether you're doing DXO, Deep Prime 3, the Fuji files work just fine. Despite the hype, I can see no distinct advantage over DXO in any of the images we've tested. And I know people are coming in the comments saying, you're crazy, it doesn't compare, I always run everything through DXO. Hey, if that works for you, that's fine. I'm just here to do an objective review, just like I do when we're comparing Lightroom versus Capture One, and people call me crazy for not agreeing with the one they like. Don't be a fanboy. Don't be loyal to any of these companies because they are certainly not loyal to you. And that goes for camera brands as well. In the end, it's the images and the feeling of your images that you're outputting, the emotion, the soul that matters, not how pristine and perfect and technical they are. This is something I talk about every time in my live shadow hackers workshops to really get our emphasis back to the drama and the feeling of photos. You can come to one of those free. I'll put a link in the comments. Now, maybe we should do a whole review on lens corrections, but I think it's another one of those things that we get too hung up on. Oftentimes, we get so hung up on settings that we forget the artistry of our photography. Here's the Lightroom version with chromatic aberration and lens corrections turned on. And here is the DXO version. You can see there's a slight difference. I think DXO is overdoing the vignette correction and kind of lightening it up a little too much, but maybe that's just me. Lightroom's integrated lens corrections and chromatic aberration generally work very well. Are there times when you might get better results out of DXO pure raw? Possibly. Is it vastly better than the results out of Lightroom, giving you effectively double the sensor size or whatever it is that the reviewers are saying? Absolutely not. There's almost no difference, and we have to pixel peep super, super deep. I think DXO is doing some interesting things. What I really want to see is for them to pick up the game on DXO Photo Lab and get it up to speed with Lightroom in terms of workflow and processing quality, because I do think it has a lot of potential, as I've said in my other reviews. I think having a separate plugin like this just for noise and lens corrections in 2025 is mostly unneeded if you're using a pro app like Camera Raw, like Lightroom, like Capture One, something like that. You can let me know what you think in the comments. I'm not here shilling for anybody. I'm just giving you the results of my tests, and you can decide what works best for you. The feeling and the emotion of our photos is actually what matters, not the technical specs. All right, you guys, peace. We'll see you on the next time. And if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe, like button, and leave a comment.